Elias Ward had never imagined that one simple mistake could change the course of his life, or perhaps even mark him for death. He had trained for years in human diplomacy and interstellar etiquette, learning the customs of dozens of alien civilizations, yet here he was, standing in the grand hall of Caelthrix's central citadel, sweating inside his custom human exo-armor, and realizing he had just said the wrong thing to the wrong alien in front of the entire world. The hall was enormous, almost overwhelmingly so. Towers of carved crystal rose from the floor like jagged mountains, reflecting light in impossible ways. The air was thick with the hum of alien energy fields, a faint vibration that seemed to resonate with the bones themselves. Dozens of Caelthrix warriors surrounded him, their six-limbed forms imposing and precise. Each one wore armor that looked alive, flowing over muscle and sinew as though it were a second skin rather than a suit. And then there was High Marshal Serixa. Serixa stood apart from the others, taller than anyone else in the hall, her presence commanding yet elegant. Her armor gleamed like polished stone, sharp edges accented with faintly glowing lines that pulsed with each movement. Her expression was unreadable, a perfect mask of Caelthrix control. Elias had rehearsed his words in his head for hours. He had planned to compliment her armor politely, acknowledge the engineering skill of her people, and then bow and retreat gracefully. Instead, his words tumbled out in the worst possible way. "Your chest is impressive," he blurted, then quickly added. "I mean, the armor." "The plating! Not, he trailed off, waving his hands frantically as his face turned red under the helmet. The hall went silent. The Caelthrix froze in a way that made Elias's stomach drop. The hum of the energy fields dimmed slightly, as if the world itself had paused. Then Serix's head tilted ever so slightly. It was almost imperceptible, but to Elias it was like a blade slicing through the air. A booming voice echoed through the hall, translated instantly into Elias's helmet audio. "Human, you have triggered the bond of steel. You have 6 standard hours to accept or reject the sacred bond, or your life shall be forfeit." Elias froze. The translator had not misheard. The bond of steel. He had heard rumors about this ancient Caelthrix law in his training, but no human had ever encountered it. It was a ritual reserved for warriors seeking lifelong union with one another, a test of courage, honor, and intent. Humans were not expected to understand it, and yet, here he was, trapped in its cold, unforgiving embrace. "Wait!" He tried to protest, his voice shaking. "This is a mistake. I meant the armor, not..." The tribunal's judgment was already in motion. Automated ceremonial devices extended from the walls, glowing with alien energy. A circular field surrounded him, and Seraxa, the boundaries of the trial space. The crowd of Caelthrix observers leaned in, curiosity blazing in their multifaceted eyes. They had never seen a human caught in this law. Some whispered to one another, unsure if they should intervene. Serixa stepped forward, her movements fluid, almost feline. "Human," she said, her voice deep and resonant.
"You have spoken a challenge. Clarification is irrelevant."
"Do you accept the bond?" Elias swallowed hard. He had never faced death this directly, not even during simulated combat exercises. And yet, he could not lie. Not now, not ever. Humans survived the universe not by hiding, not by pretending, but by confronting impossible odds head-on. I don't know how," he admitted honestly. "I don't understand your customs fully. He paused, realizing how hopeless it sounded. "But I will try if it means surviving." A murmur ran through the hall. Serix's expression shifted imperceptibly, a hint of curiosity softening her stern features. This was unusual. Most challengers would have been executed immediately, or at least punished harshly. Humans were known for their unpredictability, but no human had ever spoken truth in this context before. The first ritual began, the trial of presence. Elias was required to demonstrate his ability to stand resolute under observation, to show he could maintain composure even when facing potential death. The Kale Thrix crowd surrounded him, eyes and sensors evaluating every micro-expression, every minor movement. Elias felt his armor's systems reacting, monitoring his vitals, adjusting temperature, and stabilizing balance. It was designed for survival in harsh conditions, but now it would serve as his armor in a battle he did not expect. Minutes stretched into what felt like hours. Every movement he made was measured, every word considered. Syrinx observed quietly, her 6 limbs folded elegantly. There was no malice in her gaze, only assessment. Elias realized something critical. She was trying to understand him, not just punish him. In Kael'thric society, that was rare and dangerous. By the end of the trial, Elias had not collapsed. He had not panicked. He had survived the scrutiny of an entire alien civilization. More importantly, he had earned the faintest nod from Serica, a gesture almost imperceptible, yet monumental. The next stage was more complex. The trial of wit. Kael'thric's culture valued strategy and intelligence above brute strength. They posed riddles, scenarios, and moral dilemmas designed to reveal a challenger's true character. One scenario involved a simulated battlefield, where Elias had to choose between saving a Kael'thric's ally or completing a mission objective. The simulation was intense. It tested ethical reasoning and emotional resilience under pressure. Elias paused, thinking like a human trained to adapt. He chose to save the ally, risking failure of the objective. The simulation responded with unexpected escalation. Enemies advanced faster, hazards intensified. But he managed to improvise, using his armor's systems in ways the simulation did not anticipate. He maneuvered, countered, and ultimately succeeded in keeping the ally alive while completing the mission. The Kael'thric's tribunal observed silently, then recorded their verdict. Humans had always been underestimated. Their intelligence was often measured by rigid metrics. But Elias had demonstrated creativity, resilience, and courage, traits that Kael'thric's valued even if they could not fully comprehend them. When Syrixa spoke again, her tone was neutral but deliberate. Human, you have shown unusual resolve. You may survive the initial phase of the bond, but your choices still matter. You must demonstrate the capacity for intentional action within the remaining hours. Failure will result in immediate termination. Elias felt the weight of time pressing down. 6 hours was not long, especially for someone who had never faced laws so absolute, so alien, that a compliment could mean death. Yet, as he stood in the glowing circle, he felt something stir inside him, the human instinct that had allowed their species to survive countless wars, famines, and cosmic catastrophes. Humans adapted, humans improvised, humans survived. And he would survive now. Syrixa approached again, her armored steps silent against the crystalline floor. I will guide you, human. But you must learn quickly. Kael'thric's laws do not tolerate hesitation. You must understand the bond of steel, not just follow it blindly. Elias swallowed and nodded, feeling a strange mix of fear and determination. I will do whatever it takes, he said. I will learn. The High Marshal's gaze softened just slightly, enough that Elias thought he saw what might have been respect, or perhaps curiosity. In either case, it was dangerous, both thrilling and terrifying. For the next moments, the hall was a blur of observation, ritual preparation, and whispered speculation among the Kael'thric spectators. Aliens who had never before witnessed a human in their sacred ritual leaned forward, recording every action. On human channels, the news had already begun to spread. Elias Ward had triggered an ancient law and might die within 6 hours, or rewrite its meaning entirely. The first stage complete, Elias allowed himself a brief moment to breathe. He adjusted his armor, checking the integrity of the systems that could keep him alive. Then he looked at Syrixa again. The challenge was only beginning. 6 hours remained. Every second counted, and somehow he knew that no matter what happened, the universe would remember this human, not for strength, not for speed, not for weaponry, but for daring to survive with courage, honesty, and intelligence. For Elias Ward, the human diplomat, the night had only just begun. The law of the Cael'Thrix might claim his life, but it could never claim his spirit. The glow of the ceremonial circle faded slightly, but the tension in the hall remained electric. Every Cael'Thrix present seemed to hold its breath as Elias Ward adjusted his armor and prepared for the next stage of the Bond of Steel. 6 hours had passed in name, but the human's mind worked faster than any clock. Every second was precious, and he knew that a single mistake could end everything. Serica approached him with deliberate steps, each one measured and precise. Her 6 limbs moved with a grace that made Elias's head spin, but he focused on her words. "The next trial will test your resolve and your understanding of our culture. You will be placed in the Chamber of Decisions, where every action is observed. Your ability to choose wisely under pressure will determine whether the bond continues." Elias swallowed. He did not fully understand Cael'Thrix ethics, but he had learned one important lesson. Humans survived by observing carefully, asking questions when possible, and acting decisively. Hesitation often killed more than direct confrontation. He nodded, though the movement caused a slight squeak from the joints of his exo-armor. The chamber itself was a marvel. It was cylindrical, glowing faintly from energy fields embedded in the walls. Holographic displays projected multiple scenarios around Elias, each one designed to test moral, tactical, and emotional intelligence. The scenarios were layered and complex. One showed a simulated battle where he could save Cael'Thrix soldiers or accomplish a strategic objective. Another presented a social dilemma where alliances had to be weighed against personal gain. Yet another challenged him with rapid ethical questions that demanded instinctual answers. Elias stepped forward, taking a deep breath. His helmet displayed translations of the Cael'Thrix guidance, but he quickly realized the language was only partially literal. Many of their terms carried cultural weight humans could not fully translate. He relied on intuition, trained in decades of survival and improvisation. Humans thrived where logic alone failed, and now he had to trust that instinct. The first scenario activated. A holographic battlefield appeared, filled with Cael'Thrix soldiers under threat from simulated attackers. Elias could maneuver to complete the objective quickly, but doing so would allow several soldiers to fall. Or he could risk his mission to save them. He made a choice. He prioritized the lives of the soldiers, using his armor's mobility systems in ways that no Cael'Thrix simulation had anticipated. Energy shields deployed automatically, and his exo-armor adapted to absorb damage while keeping him balanced. The scenario escalated. More attackers appeared. The simulation tried to force failure, but Elias improvised continuously. Humans, he thought, survived through creativity more than strength. Every decision, every minor adjustment gave him an advantage the simulation could not predict. When the holographic challenge ended, the Chamber of Decisions remained silent. Then, a faint hum signaled approval. He had passed this stage, at least for now. Serica appeared next to him, observing closely. "You are unusual," she said, her voice calm but tinged with curiosity. "Most who enter these trials panic or retreat. You adapt. You survive. But this is only the beginning. Your understanding of our culture must deepen. You must act with intent, not instinct alone." Elias nodded. He was learning quickly, but he realized that the Cael'Thrix valued more than survival. They valued commitment, honor, and clarity of purpose. Humans survived because they cared, because they chose, even when choices were impossible. That might be the difference here. The second trial activated immediately. This one was social. A council of holographic Cael'Thrix leaders appeared, each with conflicting agendas. Elias had to navigate their questions and choose allies without betraying others. The challenge tested patience, perception, and diplomacy. Human leaders often relied on empathy and psychological insight, and Elias applied the same principles here. He listened, read expressions, and made choices that balanced survival with respect. Every wrong answer could trigger disapproval, or worse, judgment of failure. Hours passed. Time moved strangely in the chamber. Outside, the Cael'Thrix audience whispered among themselves. A human in the bond of steel was unprecedented. Speculation ran rampant. Was he a fool? Or was he something entirely new? Something their rigid system had never accounted for. During a brief pause, Shirixa spoke again. You are learning quickly, but you must understand our laws. We do not forgive ignorance in matters of honor. A single mistake could be fatal. Elias nodded, sweat trickling down the back of his neck. I understand. I will not make mistakes. He knew it was a lie in the literal sense. He could not predict everything, but he meant it in the human way. He would adapt, survive, and do his best. The third trial began without warning. This was the trial of commitment. The chamber shifted again, projecting scenarios where Elias had to make rapid choices about loyalty, courage, and integrity. One hologram showed Serica herself in danger, requiring immediate action to save her or maintain personal safety. Another presented the possibility of fleeing entirely, which could preserve his life but violate the bond. Elias acted decisively. He moved toward the threat, using his armor's systems not just for defense, but for creative offense. He redirected energy flows to deflect simulated attacks, creating new paths to reach Shirixa in time. The chamber responded dynamically, adjusting to his improvisations. He had learned something important. The Cael'Thrix system measured intent, not outcome. A human's adaptability, coupled with deliberate choice, could satisfy their criteria if executed correctly. Shirixa observed silently, her gaze unwavering. Elias realized she was assessing not just his actions, but his motivation. Humans were unpredictable, yes, but they were also capable of clarity of purpose in ways Cael'Thrix did not fully understand. His survival depended on this recognition. The hours ticked closer to the midpoint of the 6-hour limit. Outside the chamber, whispers had grown into murmurs of fascination. Other species, observing remotely, began to question what humans were capable of. Could a species so physically weak and fragile survive rituals designed to test the hardest, most disciplined warriors? Elias inside the chamber was proving that it could. The final challenge of Part 2 began. The trial of trust. Elias had to coordinate with Shirixa directly, without any prior knowledge of her tactics or signals. Every movement, every decision required perfect alignment. Failure could mean immediate death, both ceremonial and literal. Shirixa extended one limb toward him. You must move with intent, human. You cannot act blindly.
Your choices define the bond. Elias studied her carefully.
He mirrored her movements instinctively at first, then began to anticipate, combining observation with intuition. Human instinct, he realized, was a tool more powerful than brute strength. While Cael'Thrix relied on rigid training and muscle memory, humans could innovate in real time. The coordination was difficult, exhausting. His armor's energy reserves dropped rapidly, but he kept adjusting, improvising, and predicting Serix's next moves. After several tense minutes, the trial concluded. The chamber dimmed, signaling completion. Elias had survived, not through strength, but through ingenuity, focus, and determination. Shirixa finally spoke aloud, addressing both him and the observers. Human Elias Ward has shown remarkable skill in adaptation, intent, and courage. He does not simply survive, he thrives. The bond of steel recognizes such qualities. We will continue, but understand this. The remaining hours will test you beyond mere ability. You must demonstrate the human capacity for choice under impossible circumstances. Elias exhaled, feeling a mixture of relief and anticipation. He was halfway through the 6-hour ordeal. Each trial had been more challenging than the last, yet he had survived through methods entirely alien to the Kale Thrix: improvisation, instinctive judgment, and the sheer will to persist. The High Marshal stepped closer. "You may rest briefly," she said, "but time is limited. You must prepare for the next phase. Many humans would have already failed by now, yet you continue." Elias adjusted his armor, checking systems, repairing minor malfunctions, and reviewing the projected data from the chamber. He thought about why humans could survive where others might fail. It was not strength, not speed, nor even intelligence alone. It was the combination of willpower, adaptability, and the capacity to choose under pressure. Outside the chamber, the Kale Thrix audience murmured with astonishment. The unexpected display of human skill and ingenuity had begun to shift perceptions. For the first time, many realized that perhaps the human species had a kind of resilience that even the oldest civilizations could not fully predict or measure. Elias thought of the 6-hour clock ticking relentlessly in the back of his mind. There were still hours remaining, and the trials would only grow more demanding. He did not know what would come next, but he knew one thing clearly. Humans survived because they never gave up, never stopped thinking, and never allowed fear to dictate action. And so, as the chamber prepared for the next set of challenges, Elias Ward stood tall, exo-armor battered but operational, mind sharp and alert, and spirit unwavering. The human ambassador had survived the first half of the Bond of Steel, and in doing so, had begun to change the way an entire civilization viewed his species. The real tests were yet to come, but Elias, like every human before him, would face them head-on, using whatever tools he had at his disposal: courage, intelligence, creativity, and an unshakable will to survive. Elias had survived the first half of the 6-hour ordeal, but the tension in the Kale Thrix citadel was growing. Every observer could feel it. A human, fragile and untested by their standards, had not only survived but adapted to their ancient laws. That, in itself, was unsettling to some, inspiring to others. The whispers in the hall were louder now, more intense, and Elias knew that the next trials would be far more demanding. As the Chamber of Decisions quieted, Serixa approached again. Her 6 limbs moved with a fluid grace, and her armor reflected the faint blue light of the chamber. She studied Elias with an intensity that made him feel as though she were reading not just his thoughts, but the very patterns of his mind. "The next stage will test your ability to act under interference," she said. "Kale Thrix society is complex. Not all your challenges will be direct. Some will be subtle. You must perceive threats and respond without hesitation." Elias nodded, adjusting his armor. His systems had been taxed heavily during the previous trials, but he had learned to optimize their output in moments of stress. He had also begun to notice small details the Kale Thrix seemed to assume would go unnoticed: the slight shifts in energy readings, the micro-reactions of the observers, even patterns in Serex's gestures. Humans survived because they noticed what others overlooked, and he intended to use that skill now. The chamber shifted again, walls melting into holographic projections of the citadel itself. This time, Elias was not alone. Other holographic figures appeared, Kale Thrix council members, supposed allies, suddenly behaving unpredictably. Simulated threats emerged from hidden positions. Some projections were purely psychological, whispering voices, subtle gestures designed to make him hesitate or doubt himself. This was the trial of influence, testing how he would react when unseen forces attempted to control his decisions. Elias moved carefully. He could have reacted with brute force, but he had learned that strength alone would not save him here. Instead, he relied on observation, intuition, and anticipation. Every movement was deliberate, calculated, and yet adaptive. He noticed one holographic council member subtly pointing to an exit that was a trap. Elias pretended to follow the cue, then used his armor's enhanced mobility systems to navigate the simulated hazard safely, reaching Serix's holographic position in time to complete the scenario. A faint nod from Serixa confirmed his success. You continue to defy expectation, she said quietly. Humans are unpredictable in ways even Kael'thrick's training cannot fully simulate. This makes you dangerous. Elias allowed a small smile, despite the stress. Humans had survived countless impossible situations in history, not by conforming to rules, but by bending them creatively. He intended to prove that principle again, no matter the cost. Before he could catch his breath, the next challenge began. This time, it was not a simulation. It was real. Several Kael'thrick's officials had been positioned in the chamber under the guise of observation, but Elias quickly detected subtle anomalies in their behavior. His instincts screamed that they were testing his reactions in unpredictable ways. Indeed, he soon realized they were attempting to sabotage his progress. One official subtly blocked a path, forcing him to reroute through a section of the chamber with unstable energy fields. Another attempted to distract him with misleading instructions. Elias responded by observing the patterns, calculating timing, and using his armor systems to stabilize his balance and energy distribution. He moved faster than the human eye could track, avoiding hazards, neutralizing distractions, and maintaining focus on Serixa and the bond. Serixa watched silently, impressed. Few Kael'thricks would have managed this with such efficiency, let alone a human. She began to realize that Elias's strength was not in muscle or traditional training. It was in his mind, his adaptability, and his determination to survive. These were traits her people respected, even if they struggled to understand them. The sabotage attempts escalated. The officials coordinated subtle traps that required precise timing to avoid. One projected energy net could have immobilized Elias instantly. Another created a holographic duplicate of Serixa, designed to confuse and delay him. Each obstacle required split-second decision-making. Elias relied on human ingenuity, improvising methods his exo-armor had never been designed to perform. He used repulsor fields to counter the energy net, manipulated holographic feedback to reveal the real Serixa, and maintained forward progress through obstacles that were supposed to overwhelm him. Each success earned cautious murmurs from the Kael'thrick's observers. The whispers became recognition. This human was not merely surviving. He was adapting, innovating, and thriving under pressure. The idea that humans were physically weak was being challenged by one man's audacity. Hours passed and the 6-hour deadline loomed closer. Elias's systems were strained, his body exhausted, yet his mind remained sharp. He understood that the next trial would demand not only skill, but emotional intelligence. Kael'thricks valued loyalty, courage, and integrity as much as physical capability. To succeed, Elias would need to demonstrate these qualities in ways that were unfamiliar to the aliens. The next scenario activated, the trial of choice. A simulated crisis presented itself in real time. A rebellion within the Kael'thrick Citadel. Holographic factions clashed, and Elias was given the option to act independently, save civilians, or assist Serixa directly. Every choice carried potential failure. Human instincts told him to prioritize survival, yet he also understood that the bond of steel measured intent above all else. He chose to protect the civilians first, using his armor to shield them and manipulate energy barriers to contain the conflict. This choice forced him to improvise further. He redirected energy channels, created temporary defensive structures, and even used the environment to his advantage, turning walls and debris into barriers. The simulated rebellion ended, but not without testing every facet of his abilities: mental agility, spatial reasoning, and moral judgment. Serixa finally spoke aloud, her voice echoing through the chamber. Human, you continue to exceed expectation. Your choices reflect an understanding of intent, not mere survival. You demonstrate qualities that Kael'thrick's warriors rarely possess: creativity, empathy, and courage under extreme pressure. Elias allowed himself a brief moment of relief, but he knew the trial was far from over. The final phase approached, the test of commitment. This would determine whether he could withstand the remainder of the 6 hours and demonstrate readiness to bind through the bond of steel. The chamber transformed again, this time projecting a scenario where both Elias and Syracuse were placed in simultaneous danger. Alien predators, environmental hazards, and tactical challenges appeared together, requiring coordination and quick thinking. Elias realized that success depended not only on his skills but on his ability to anticipate Syrax's actions and synchronize with her seamlessly. He studied her movements carefully. Unlike the simulations, this required true intuition. Calthric's training emphasized muscle memory and precise execution, but Elias relied on observation, prediction, and improvisation. He mimicked her posture and adjusted timing, aligning his movements with hers while simultaneously navigating the threats. The predators approached, energy surges threatened to destabilize his armor, and every decision counted. Yet Elias adapted, using his exo-armor in innovative ways, repurposing energy shields, redirecting attack vectors, and creating barriers from environmental features. He moved in harmony with Syraxa, anticipating her actions and supporting her without hesitation. As the scenario concluded, the chamber dimmed its projections. Silence fell. Elias's armor systems were near critical limits, but he stood upright, heart pounding. He had survived the sabotage, the simulations, and the real-time challenges. He had demonstrated human ingenuity, resilience, and the ability to act decisively under impossible circumstances. Circa stepped forward, her 6 limbs perfectly balanced, her expression unreadable yet tinged with respect. "Elias Ward," she said, addressing the entire hall, "you have shown qualities that redefine the boundaries of survival and understanding. You have navigated interference, anticipated threats, and acted with courage and integrity. You honor the principles of the bond of steel, even as a human outsider." The observers murmured in astonishment. Aliens who had doubted humanity's capabilities now reconsidered. A species previously underestimated for physical limitations had proven that resilience, adaptability, and ingenuity had surpassed strength and training. Elias allowed himself a small exhale. The 6-hour limit was still not reached, but he had overcome the most dangerous and unpredictable challenges so far. He realized something profound. Humans thrived because they could adapt faster than systems could predict, act with purpose under pressure, and survive situations that seemed impossible. Syraxa extended one limb toward him. "The final phase approaches. You have shown remarkable strength of mind and courage. The remaining hours will test your ability to choose the bond with understanding, not fear. Prepare yourself, human." "The universe is watching." Elias nodded, adjusting his armor once more. The exosuit had been pushed to its limits, yet it held. He had survived interference, sabotage, and complex moral and tactical challenges. More importantly, he had proven that human survival was not just a matter of physical strength. It was ingenuity, determination, and an unwavering will. As the chamber prepared for the final phase of the bond of steel, Elias reflected on the trials he had overcome. He had faced the unpredictability of Calthric's society, the tests of wit and morality, and the interference of those who sought to exploit his inexperience. Yet he had adapted, survived, and demonstrated qualities that even the most disciplined Calthric's warriors rarely exhibited. The audience in the hall leaned forward, their fascination palpable. Humans had rewritten expectations in real time, using creativity, observation, and courage. They could not be ignored. Elias tightened a strap on his armor and took a deep breath. The final phase would come soon. The challenges would be harder, the stakes higher, and the risks greater. But he was ready. He was human, and humans did not survive by giving up. They survived by thinking, improvising, and refusing to be defeated, even when the odds seemed impossible. The chamber pulsed with light, signaling the transition. Elias stepped forward, ready to face the next stage. Every fiber of his being was focused. Every system in his exo-armor was optimized. Every instinct, every human trait he had relied upon for survival was at its peak. He was not merely a visitor in Cael'thrick's law. He was a challenger, a test, and perhaps the first human the universe had truly recognized for the full measure of its potential. And the final trials were only beginning. The chamber pulsed with energy, brighter than before, signaling that the final phase of the bond of steel had begun. Elias Ward stood in the center, his exo-armor worn and scratched from the trials, systems humming at their limits. Outside, the Cael'thrick's audience had gathered, their attention fully fixed on the human who had defied every expectation. For the first time in centuries, their laws had been challenged, not by rebellion or weaponry, but by ingenuity, courage, and sheer will. Sarixa stepped forward, her armored form gleaming under the chamber's light. She had observed him closely throughout every trial, and now she would witness the final proof of his intent.
"Elias Ward," she said, her voice steady and commanding. "The bond of steel requires understanding, intent, and choice. You have survived, adapted, and demonstrated courage.
But now you must act with purpose, not instinct. The final decision rests with you." Elias felt the weight of the 6-hour limit pressing on him. He could feel his body tiring, his system strained, but his mind remained alert. Humans had survived impossible situations for centuries, not because they were the strongest, but because they refused to surrender, because they thought creatively, and because they chose to act when others hesitated. He would do the same now. The chamber shifted, creating a new scenario. Holographic simulations of Sarixa appeared, each one slightly different. One showed her in peril, trapped in a collapsing energy field. Another depicted her surrounded by hostile Cael'thrick's warriors. Elias could feel the trap immediately. These were tests of perception, not combat. The simulation demanded that he choose the real Sarixa among illusions while making decisions that could influence the outcome of the ritual. He studied carefully, recalling every detail from the previous trials. The Cael'thrick's tested intent above all else. Humans survived not by guessing, but by analyzing, observing, and acting decisively. Elias moved toward the real Soraka, noting subtle differences in posture, micro-movements, and energy signatures. He anticipated hazards, recalculated paths on the fly, and used his armor to stabilize his position in ways the simulation could not predict. The chamber responded. The energy field pulses synchronized with his movements, testing his understanding of timing and commitment. One false step could trigger failure. Elias adjusted, adapting continuously. His exo-armor redistributed energy to maintain balance and enhance reaction speed. Every move was deliberate, every decision intentional. Humans, he realized, survived by turning pressure into opportunity, and this was the ultimate test of that principle. Finally, he reached the real Sarixa, grasping her armored hand. The holographic scenarios faded, leaving the chamber quiet except for the low hum of Cael'thrick's energy systems. Elias had chosen wisely, acted with purpose, and demonstrated that his intent aligned with the core principles of the bond of steel. Sarixa studied him, her multifaceted eyes reflecting light and emotion he could almost understand. "You have shown extraordinary understanding, human," she said. "Not all Cael'thricks would survive this stage, yet you have adapted, persevered, and acted with honor. The bond is yours to accept." Durabia. Elias nodded, the exhaustion of the past hours weighing on him, but determination burning brighter than ever. He had survived simulations, sabotage, physical challenges, and moral dilemmas. He had proven that humans were capable of more than their appearance suggested. They were resilient, clever, and capable of extraordinary choice under pressure. "I accept," he said simply, his voice steady despite fatigue. "I choose to honor the bond." The chamber responded. Energy flows intensified, creating a radiant halo around both of them. The Cael'thrick's audience erupted in hushed murmurs of awe. Humans had never been recognized in this way before, and to see one stand unbroken, intact and victorious, inspired both respect and disbelief. The formal declaration began. Syrixa extended one limb, touching Elias's shoulder. "Then let the bond of steel be complete," she intoned. The energy around them surged, forming a delicate lattice of light that linked their armors. Every observer could see the connection, a visual representation of commitment, respect, and mutual understanding. Elias felt a strange warmth, not in his body, but in his mind. The Kale-Thrix bond was not simply legal, it was spiritual, a recognition of intent and honor. Humans did not always understand alien spirituality, but they recognized commitment. He had chosen deliberately, acted with courage, and survived. That was enough. Outside the chamber, whispers turned into admiration. The Kale-Thrix had never witnessed a human engage with their laws so completely, so successfully. Rival factions that had expected him to fail now reconsidered their assumptions. Humans, previously underestimated, were a force to be reckoned with, not through sheer strength, but through adaptability, ingenuity, and the capacity for decisive action. As the energy of the bond settled, Syrixa spoke again, softer this time. "You have changed the perception of your species, human. The Kale-Thrix will remember this day, not because of conquest, but because of courage, intelligence, and choice." Elias allowed himself a small smile. The 6-hour ordeal was over, but the consequences would ripple far beyond the chamber. He had survived impossible trials, demonstrated human ingenuity, and proven that survival often relied on qualities alien civilizations failed to anticipate: creativity, adaptability, and the determination to act under pressure. The Kale-Thrix Council approached, formally acknowledging the outcome. There were no further challenges, no executions. Elias had earned respect, not merely tolerance. In their culture, this was extraordinary. He had done something few Kale-Thrix warriors could manage. He had rewritten expectation through human ability. Syrixa's gaze softened. "You have shown that humans are capable of understanding, courage, and loyalty in ways our laws rarely account for. You honor the bond not because it is required, but because you choose to act with intent." "That is true strength." Elias nodded, exhaustion finally pressing down, but satisfaction warming his spirit. Humans survived by adapting, by improvising, and by acting deliberately under impossible circumstances. He had proven it again, in a way that even the most disciplined alien civilization could not ignore. Outside the Citadel, observers recorded the event. Humans were no longer considered weak, limited, or unprepared. They were recognized as capable, creative, and resilient. The story of Elias Ward, the human who survived the bond of steel, would travel across systems, redefining what it meant to be human in the galaxy. Syrixa extended a limb toward him once more, offering a gesture of respect. "The bond is complete, Elias Ward. Together we face what comes next, not as alien and human, but as partners, recognized by law, by choice, and by courage." Elias shook her hand firmly. "We survived together," he said. "And I think that's just the beginning." The audience erupted into applause, not just for the success of the ritual, but for the demonstration of human ingenuity and perseverance. Whispers spread through Kale-Thrix and beyond. If one human could survive and succeed in their most sacred law, what could an entire species? The 6-hour challenge had ended. Elias's exo-armor was battered, his body tired, and his mind still processing every detail of the trials. Yet he felt a deep sense of triumph. He had faced impossible odds, alien laws, sabotage, and moral challenges, and had survived them all, not through brute force, but through cleverness, courage, and deliberate choice. Syrixa observed him with quiet admiration. "Your species is dangerous," she said softly. "Not because of weapons, but because of thought, because of determination, because you never give up, even when survival seems impossible. Elias smiled, exhausted, but proud. Humans survive because we have to, because giving up isn't an option, and because we find ways to make impossible situations work. The chamber's energy dimmed, signaling the conclusion of the bond of steel. Elias stepped forward, standing side by side with Serica, feeling a mixture of relief, pride, and excitement. He had survived the unthinkable, and in doing so, changed the way an entire civilization perceived humanity. The Kale Thrick's audience began to depart, still murmuring in amazement. Humans were no longer a curiosity. They were a species to respect, to consider, and perhaps even to fear. Not because of muscle or size, but because of adaptability, intelligence, and determination. Elias had proven that one human, armed with courage and ingenuity, could survive against the highest stakes. Serica turned to him, her armor reflecting the ambient light. "You have done what few could. You have survived, learned, and honored the bond. Humanity will be remembered for this day."
Elias nodded, taking a deep breath. He had entered the bond of steel uncertain, awkward, and untested.
He left it recognized, respected, and triumphant. The trials had shown him the strength of humans, not in their bodies, but in their minds, hearts, and unwavering determination. For the first time in Kale Thrick's history, a human had survived the bond of steel, and in doing so had proven that adaptability, courage, and choice were more powerful than any weapon. The story of Elias Ward would travel across the stars, an example of human ingenuity and resilience. It would be told to humans and aliens alike that survival, intelligence, and determination could bend even the strictest laws of the most ancient civilizations. Elias exhaled, tired, but victorious. The universe had tested him, pushed him to the brink, and demanded every ounce of his skill and will. And he had survived. Humans always did.